Okay. Well, everyone, it's good to see you. And today I'm going to talk about why writing is like cooking. So, how many of you have cooked a meal for other people before? Raise your
I
hand.
have.
Okay. So, what?
I for sure have.
Okay. So, everybody cooks, everybody does this. And when you cook, you know, most people think of cooking as you're over a stove and you're just at home in your kitchen and you got the fire going and it takes like 30 minutes and that's all you need to do to cook. But we
That is
know
not true.
that's
My brother loves baking. He made a 6 layer cake the other day. It took him 4 hours.
exactly.
5 hours.
And think about all
So
the think about what happened with that bread, right? So you had all the ingredients for the bread came through a whole supply chain, years of experience for human history learning how to make bread. So, what I want to talk about is what happens when you have friends coming over, you have a deadline, it's time to cook, and you need to cook a brand new dish that you've never cooked before. So, well, how does that begin? So, in writing, when you're getting ready to write and when you want to improve your writing, one of the best ways to do it is by improving the quality of what you read. So, as a writer myself, what I do is I read a lot of books and I just try to read the best writing in the world. And it's the same thing if I was practicing cooking. I would go out to restaurants, I would go to Michelin star restaurants, I would travel and I would eat food from all over the world. And then what I would do is I would save the best recipes that I actually find. And it's the same thing with writing. I save formulas and different pieces that I think are really good. Like if there's a good introduction, I'll save it into my notebook. Or if there's a really good sentence, I'll save them. And I have lines and lines of quotes. So the way writing begins is with consuming, and the way cooking begins is with eating. And you do that for years and years to prepare for what you're doing. So then it's the day, the time that you need to actually cook, and you're with your family, you're with your friends, and you text your friend Stacy and you say, "Hey Stacy, what do you want for dinner tonight?" So you start talking to people about what they want. You start thinking about, what do I want? What sounds delicious to me? What makes me excited to cook? What is both tasty and nutritious, right? We want to be eating our vegetables because it's healthy, and we want to be getting our protein because that's good for us, but we also want to enjoy what we're eating. And if something is too nutritious but not tasty, then we're not going to eat it. And if something is tasty but not nutritious, well, it's just going to make us overweight and not healthy. And so you want to be eating things that are both tasty and nutritious. And it's the same thing with writing. You want to be writing things and you want to be reading things that are both really fun to consume, but that also make you smarter, help you make better decisions. And then as you start planning, what you want to be doing is you want to be looking for what I call pumpkin pie problems. So if you think about, say, it's late fall, it's early November, Halloween just ended, and you have had pumpkins outside of your house. And you've carved the pumpkin, so you can't really resell the pumpkin. And if you just like eat pumpkin out of the pumpkin, it doesn't taste very good. And then you might have flour. And say the flour is just sort of sitting there. And if you just like eat flour, I mean, it tastes fine. But if you actually can combine pumpkins with flour and add a little bit of cinnamon, you can have some amazing pumpkin pie. And it's the same thing with ideas, where when you're thinking about what to write, what you want to do is you want to take idea one that's okay on its own, that already exists, that you already have, that you have easy access to it, it's already in your pantry, you already bought it, and then you want to combine it with idea two. You know this idea, you've spent years maybe learning about this idea through things that you learned in school, through an experience that you had when you're playing sports. Maybe it was something that you did on the soccer field that was a very impactful experience for you. And what you want to do is you want to combine them. So with pumpkin, If you can, for pumpkin pie, if you can combine the flour and the pumpkins, pumpkin pie is like the best dessert ever. And likewise, if you can combine a couple different ideas that people haven't thought about combining before, then you can have something that, once again, writing that's both tasty and nutritious. But remember, people are coming to your house, so it has to be really good. And that means, since the food needs to be really good, if you ask any chef, what is the key to making good food? You know what they'll say? I can't do it without good ingredients. And it's the same thing for writing. If you don't have high quality information coming into your brain and high quality experiences, meaningful conversations, it's going to be hard for you to write well, just like with cooking. So since you have people coming over, you're going to be forced to cook really well. And so you can't go to your normal supermarket. Now you got to go to the best supermarket in the city. And you've never been to the supermarket. We'll call it Safeway. And now you got to go drive to Safeway. And you need to get in the car and you start going. So now you get to the grocery store and you walk in, and now you need to find the highest quality produce, right? Like some of the bananas are all brown and they're kind of old. Some of them are not ripe yet. You got to find the ripe food for the right time, for the right meal. And it's the same thing with ideas, where some ideas are going to be more relevant than others. So if it's January 1st, what's an idea that people would be really interested in? New Year's. If it's July 4th, what's an idea people would be really interested in? That's the American Independence Day. And so people might be really interested in the American Revolution, of how America gained independence in 1776.
Or they could be very interested in making a cake with the American flag on top.
Exactly. And so now you have to start thinking about, what am I going to make? And remember, you're in the middle of the grocery store, you have all these ingredients, and you don't have a lot of time. And so there's watermelons in the middle, and then there are watermelon slices. And since you don't have a lot of time and you might not have a knife at home, you want to start thinking about getting watermelon slices. And this is the first place that a lot of people go wrong with writing. They have these things that are called watermelon problems. And watermelon problems are way too big. They're hard to hold. They don't really fit into a bag. You need a crazy knife to cut them. They're really heavy. And you can't just eat a watermelon. A watermelon needs to be sliced, and it needs to be created. And each big watermelon has all these different slices in it. And within those slices, there's all these different seeds. And it's the same thing with writing, where the first place that people go wrong with their writing is they pick problems that are way too big. And those are watermelon problems. So what you need to do is you want to go find slices. And slices are ideas that are easy to digest, that taste really good, that are big enough to satiate you, but small enough that they're easy to hold in your hand. And then watermelon, each slice has all these different seeds. And those seeds are like quotes that you're using. Those seeds are different facts that you're borrowing from experiences that you've had. And if you're not sure how to narrow down a problem or a topic from a watermelon into a slice, well, guess what? We have just been at the grocery store. We've been looking for all the highest quality ingredients, and now it's time to go home. And when we get in the car, after we bought all of our really high quality food, what we need to do is we need to look at a map, because we've never been to this grocery store before and we need to get home. And so when we go on the map, well, we go on, say, Google Maps. And what happens when you open up Google Maps? Well, you see a big view of the world, right? And so you'll see all of North America, all of South America, but you're in Ottawa and you need a map for Ottawa. So what do? How do you get from a big map to a more defined one? you pinch, right? All of us have done this, right? You open up your map and you go pinch, 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 and every
or you
single
can
time,
or you
yeah,
can type it or you can type in your house name or just a glebe in the search bar or Ottawa, and then it will just show you that type of map.
true, exactly. So I'm going to go with the pinch metaphor. So if you pinch or you double tap and you do that 3 times, now you'll be in your hometown of Ottawa. So now on the same screen, you can get really specific. And so now, just by pinching 3 times, by zooming into what your topic is 3 times, you now can see, okay, I know where I am in Ottawa. I don't have to think about the rest of North America, and I have just enough that I need to get from the grocery store to home. And this is what you should do when you think about what to write about. Where what people do all the time when they go wrong is they write about topics that are way too big. And what you want to do is you want to write about the smallest thing that you possibly can. Why? Because ideas expand. And every single time you pinch, you say, oh my goodness, there's so much more detail in the world than I ever thought, right? Like at the big scale, you're like, oh, it's just Ottawa. That's just a town on a map. There's nothing to it. But then when you pinch in 5 times, you see there's all these roads and parks and schools and hospitals and soccer fields, all these kinds of things. And that's how writing is. What's really cool about writing is once you pinch in 3, 5, 6 times and you really start looking at a local map, you see that there is so much detail. And then, just like Google Maps, what you can do is you can change from one view to another view. So now you can see the normal map, and then you can start seeing a 3D satellite perspective. And then you can see what Ottawa might look like at night. And then you can see what it looks like at daytime. You can actually go into a street and you can see what the entire street is. And what you begin to realize is you could spend your entire life on Google Maps just looking at Ottawa and finding all these new things. And my point here is that what you want to do when you're writing is pick topics that are small and specific enough that are like what I would call 5 pinch problems, 5 pinch ideas. And then that way, once you begin to explore those things, that's when really good writing happens. Because if you're at too high a layer of resolution, you can't actually get from the grocery store to home. So remember, we just bought the best ingredients from the grocery store. We bought watermelon slices instead of an entire watermelon, which is impossible to eat, and it's really hard to hold and doesn't fit in our bag. And now it's time to go home. So we drive in our car and remember, we've pinched in on the map and we get home. And what happens when we get home? We have all of our ingredients, and what do we need to do? We need to organize things. And organizing things is just like note taking. And one thing that makes writing way easier is if you take notes. And I'll explain that in a second. So you get into your kitchen, and what do you need to do? You need to put everything into the right place. So the pantry, the fridge, the freezer, right? Some things need to be stored in different ways. And in order to do that, then everything is really clean, and then you can focus on what is in front of you on your stove or on your cutting board, whatever it is. And the same thing is true for note taking, where what you want to do is when you're out in your life and you have some kind of meaningful experience, what you want to do is take notes whenever you can. And the reason why that's really valuable is because you don't want to do the thinking that you need to do in order to write, at least the base level thinking, when you're at your computer. You want to actually sit down at your computer with all your thinking already done. And it's just like cooking, right? You can't just get to the stove and say, oh, my ingredients are magically going to be here. I'm going to magically know what the best recipe is. I'm going to have built a taste to know exactly what good cooking looks like. No, you need to spend years eating. You need to spend the time going to the grocery store, all those sorts of things. Likewise with writing, spend your time writing, or spend your time reading, spend your time collecting notes, collecting your best ideas. And then once it's time to cook and you know that you're making a dish, say strawberry shortcake, you have all those ingredients that you need. You've already had strawberry shortcake from all the best restaurants in the world. And guess what's great about writing? With reading, books are cheap. Like you can pay $15, the price of, what is that? 5 coffees. And for 5 coffees, you could have somebody's entire worldview, all the ideas that they've thought about, put into a book. And you just sit there and you look at it, and all their best ideas are basically put into your brain. And what you want to do is you want to save the insights and the epiphanies that you have into a note-taking system. And but the thing with cooking is it's the same thing, but it's a little bit more expensive. What you would want to do if you wanted to be a world-class chef is you'd want to go eat food from the best chefs in the world, to go to Michelin star restaurants. And by doing that, then you would have the knowledge and the taste and the materials that you need to cook a really good dinner. So we've gone through the organization phase. So where are we? We've consumed stuff, we've planned stuff, we've gone to the grocery store, and we've organized. And this is what's really interesting, right? We haven't even started cooking yet, and we've been cooking for years. We have spoken so much about cooking, and this is one of the big problems with writing education, where when people focus on writing education, they only focus on the actual writing. That's like only focusing on the actual cooking. And we've already shown that writing is so much more than what you do than what is sitting at your computer, just like cooking is so much more than what you do at the stove. But now that you've done all this hard work, it's time to cook. So what do? Well, you start thinking, okay, so I have guests coming over to my house. My food needs to be really good. And I have spent years taking notes. So if I'm making strawberry shortcake, I can look at what is the best way to cut a strawberry. What does strawberry shortcake taste really good with? So I'm thinking if you have some warm strawberry shortcake, maybe you want some cold ice cream next to it. And maybe you read a book that showed you what the best combination with strawberry shortcake was. And then I heard that strawberry shortcake tastes really good with Pellegrino water. So you say, okay, I'm going to make sure to serve Pellegrino water. So you make a quick plan, and now it's time to cook. So you're combining your ingredients. And remember, this is the best part. You've already done the hard work, where you have spent years doing this. So by the time you have to cook, oh, I know exactly what to do. I just combine different things. I have my recipes that I've collected over years, and it's time to get to work. And it's the same thing when I write. So what I do is people are always like, David, how do you write so much? And I write, in terms of the amount of words that I publish, more than almost anyone I've ever met. But of those people who write as much as I do, I spend way less time writing. I probably spend maybe 6 to 8 hours a week writing. And last year I published 200,000 words, meaning that I published the equivalent of 3 whole books online in just 6 to 8 hours, right? So my point is that what I do is I'm going to go back through the steps. I spend a lot of time being very deliberate about what I consume, having good experiences, having friends who are really smart and who are really curious and who make me smarter, and reading great books and finding good movies to watch. And then what I do is I take notes from those things. And then what I do is I spend a lot of time talking to people, thinking about, what do you like reading? Whenever I walk by a bookstore, I go in and I pay very close attention to what are people interested in, what are ideas that people want more of, and then I spend a lot of time going to the grocery store. And I spend so much time, remember I said I go into bookstores, and I start looking for different books. But what I like to do is, when I invite people over to my house for dinner, I don't just want to make them eggs, right? Like everyone can cook eggs. I just cooked eggs this morning. What I like to do is I like to cook a meal so that I can impress my guests. What I like to do is cook a dish that they've never tried before. So that means when it comes to ingredients, what I can either do is I can either take multiple very basic high quality ingredients and combine them together. But what I really like doing is finding ideas that people don't even know to begin with, and then combining them. So how do I do that? Well, one of the things is I go and I spend some time traveling, for example. And when I travel, I'll find different foods that I will then say, ha, I can take this food from one place and bring it into a new environment. And then people can say, whoa, I've never tried this before. And as a culture, we do this all the time, right? Like if you go to New York, you can have curry, you can from which is Indian food, you can have sushi, which is Japanese food, and you can have avocado toast, which is I think really originated in Australia. And we do this all the time. This is how chefs get a lot of their new ideas. And so what I do is I look for ideas that people aren't talking about, but that are really interesting. And so, in order to do that, you can't just go to the normal grocery store, right? Because then you're just going to cook what everybody else is cooking. So, what I'll do is one of my favorite things to do in New York, where I live, is I'll go to Chinatown in Queens. And in Chinatown, I find all these crazy foods. Or what I used to do when I was growing up is there was a market. I grew up in San Francisco, and there was a market, and me and my mom, we would go to this Mexican market, and we would get this Mexican cheese and these Mexican beans and this Mexican cream, and it was delicious. And then we would go and we would bring it all in. So with ideas, what I do is I like to travel through time. So what I like to do is I like to go find old ideas which have been forgotten and then bring them back and apply them to the present moment. So one of the things that I was doing a couple months ago was I was taking a class about this philosopher. His name is Max Weber, and he did most of his work between like 1917 and like 1930. And he wrote about capitalism. And he wrote about the impact of what's called Protestantism, which is a sect of sort of very similar to Christianity, and how capitalism and Christianity combined. And he's what's called a sociologist. And so what I did was, because I had gone back 100 years, now in my writing, I can take all of those notes and then bring them into the present and recombine them. So I'm doing the exact same thing with ideas. I'm traveling through time. I'm looking for ideas in different parts of the world. And then also what I'll do is I try to not shop where everybody else shops. So where does everybody shop? They go into the bookstore and they look at what are the books on the 4 tables at the front of the bookstore, and they will go buy the bestsellers. I try not to read a lot of bestsellers. I try to read books that are all the way in the back of Amazon. Or I'll try to, and by doing that, what I'll do is I'll just follow little rabbit holes in Amazon, and I'll just find books that I've never heard of before, and I'll just give them a try. Or what I'll do is I have people that I really trust to help me find books, like Shane Parrish, right? And so if I go read Shane's blog, then I can say, oh, wow, he recommended a great book called Lessons of History. And then I read Lessons of History, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy, Will Durant, spent like 80 years being a historian, and he distilled all the things that he learned into 80 books, or 80 pages, 100 pages of lessons. And then I read that book and I apply it. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for great ingredients from people I trust. And what I'm doing is I'm peeking under the lid, and I'm trying to find ideas that other people haven't heard of. So once again, back to our meal, right? We're trying to make food for other people. That's a dish that they've never tried before. That's absolutely delicious and nutritious, right? Good for us and tastes so good. So now it's time to cook. So we're cooking, but now we've done some cooking, and that's like the easiest part. Literally, cooking's the easiest part. Just like actual writing isn't that hard because we've done all this work before. So now it's time for a taste test. And what you want to do is you want to get a spoon and you want to dip it into your strawberry shortcake or something like that. And you want to go, pretty good. My recipes were very helpful. The ingredients are good, but you know what? It needs a pinch of salt and an extra teaspoon of sugar. So then, well, that's just my assessment. So what I want to do is I want to ask somebody else what they think. And so if I ask somebody what they think, here's what I'll ask for. Does it taste good? Is it nutritious? And what should I change? So that's what I would ask if I was cooking. And with writing, when I go do a taste test, I use an acronym called CRIBS. So what does CRIBS stand for? I ask people about things that are confusing, repeated, insightful, boring, and surprising. So with the taste test, if I ask someone, does it taste good? Well, the answer is yes or no. And if it doesn't taste good, I know I need to change things. If I ask something, is it nutritious? And they say no, I know that I might need to add more broccoli into my dish or some spinach. Just like with writing, it's very similar. So what you want to do with cribs is when you ask somebody, is this confusing? Well, what do you do if something is confusing? You might have to rewrite it, right? Like, okay, I need to change how I told that story. If something is repeated, and we repeat things all the time in writing, you want to get rid of things that you say over and over and over again. If something's repeated, you just know to delete it. If something is insightful, we want our writing to teach other people. Well, we want to talk more about that. Things that are insightful, people want to learn about. So when somebody tells you, that was really interesting, talk more about that. If something is boring, well, once again, you can either delete it. You don't want things that are boring, just like you don't want to cook things that don't taste good, so you can delete it. Or if something is boring, rewrite that section. And if something is surprising, guess what you want to do? It's just like a movie with suspense. You want to build up to the surprise. Great writing is always surprising. You want to set some kind of premise, and then you want to go, whoa, I never expected that before, right? This is what great movies do. Great movies have a twist and a turn, and it makes you say, whoa, I did not expect that. And even yesterday, I was talking to a big Hollywood actress. She was on House and Once Upon a Time, and we were talking about stories. And what she told me was that a good story takes you on this like emotional roller coaster, right? And it's the same thing with writing and a good dish. If you go to a very fancy restaurant, what they will do is they have all these different courses. And all the courses are designed in a very particular order. And they'll often go from hot to cold, from crunchy to chewy. And they'll actually change up all the different textures of the piece. But there's always like a general theme for the restaurant and for that 8-course meal. And it's the same thing with writing. What you want to do is you want to surprise the reader by changing up how you're doing things. So maybe you're telling one story on top that's filled with narrative. You're telling one story at the bottom that's mostly built off facts. And so now we're into surprising. So remember, confusing, repeated, insightful, boring, and surprising. So Rowan, if you talk to Mac and you say, okay, Mac, I need your help editing my writing. You say, tell me, what is confusing, repeated, insightful, boring, and surprising? Same thing, Rowan. If you talk to Mac and you say, hey, how's my food? You say, what's tasty? How can I make it more nutritious? And is there anything else I can do? And you know exactly what you need to do. So now that you've tasted your own food, and you do that as a writer by reading it out loud and by just trying to experience it, not from the perspective of a creator, but from the perspective of somebody who's actually reading your writing, a consumer, what you need to do now is you serve your dish. So you've done the taste test, and guess what? Your friends are coming over. And this is the scary part. But you know what's great about serving a dish? You know how, I don't know, maybe you have Thanksgiving dinner. And I don't know about you, but every time we host Thanksgiving dinner, that is the cleanest our house is ever going to be. We make the beds, we vacuum the floors, we make sure that the shoes are in the perfect place at the house. We make sure that all the dishes are put away. And guess what? The rest of the year, our house can be kind of a mess. But when other people come over, we want to make sure nobody thinks that David is a messy guy. I am sometimes. And it's the same thing with writing, where guess what? My thinking is really messy. My thinking is chaotic and it's jumbled, and I get really frustrated that I can't navigate my own brain sometimes. But when I know that other people are coming over, I clean my house. Just like when I know other people are going to see my ideas, I clean up my ideas and I refine them and I make them really smart. And when I just back to cooking, when I know other people, like this morning, right? I made breakfast and I made a steak and I made eggs. And I think it tasted pretty good. I was happy with it. But you know what? If I was cooking for other people, it wouldn't have been nearly good enough because our standards when we make things for other people are higher because we want to impress them and we know that they're going to judge us. And so as writers, this is why we want to share our ideas. We want to actually spread them wide. Now, that doesn't mean every idea we share with everybody. Sometimes it's good to journal for yourself so that you can think through something. Just like this morning, I cooked for myself so that I could get in good shape and so that I wouldn't be hungry. And so I'd be in a good place to be with you right now. But what I do recommend doing is writing in public. And that's because, once again, writing in public makes us think better. But that's not the only reason why writing in public is so helpful. What happens when you invite friends over? Well, if your cooking is really good, they're going to say, oh my goodness, David is the best cook ever. We're going to go to dinner at David's house way more. And guess what happens once we start eating together? Well, we're going to have great conversations and we're going to have laughs and we're going to play games and we're going to talk about great ideas together. And guess what? If you are the person known for being the good cook, everyone's going to want you to have you as a friend. And you know what your friends are going to do? They're going to invite their favorite friends over. And all of a sudden, party at your house, you are the person who knows all these really cool people just because you're a good cook. And it's the same thing with ideas. You know what's so cool about sharing ideas in public? Just like when you invite people over, you become a magnet for people, ideas, and opportunities. You become a lighthouse for like-minded people. But what's amazing about ideas is you have a phone in your pocket, a computer in your hands right now, and with it, you can reach anybody on planet Earth who has an internet connection 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But ideas have things that are even better than food. With food, every single time you have to cook again, well, you got to buy new ingredients. And you're cooking, you can only cook for a very limited number of people at a time. And most of those people are going to be in your neighborhood. But with ideas, once you make something once, people can consume it forever. And those people can be anywhere on planet Earth. So when a new person consumes one of your ideas, you don't have to spend any more money. It's like the greatest cheat code in human history. And the fact that not everybody is sharing ideas online baffles me. And this is one of the things that I wish that we did a better job of teaching in school. Where in school, I think a lot of the reason that people don't like writing is because they only write for one person, their teacher, and then their teacher gives them a grade. But in life, what actually happens is you can write things for thousands and thousands of people. Last year, more than 1 million people went on my website. That's crazy. That's like 30 baseball stadiums worth of people. And whenever I go to a baseball game, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so many people. And 30 baseball stadiums went on my website last year. And that means that what's amazing is every single time that a new person comes over, I don't have to do anything. So once again, this is why I encourage you to cook for other people, because when you invite friends over, you have good conversations and you become the center of the party, the person who knows all the interesting people. Same thing with writing. When you write online, you become the center of the party and you become a lighthouse for like-minded people. And guess what? Those people will want to reach out to you and they will share ideas with you. They'll give you opportunities that you never expected before. Like right after this, I have an interview with a newspaper called The Guardian. And it's one of the biggest magazines or newspapers in Europe. And they're asking me about my take on education. I've never met the journalist. I did nothing to do this. All I did was share my ideas. And now this journalist is coming over to my house for dinner because they hear I have good food. So that is my entire way of thinking about writing. And so what are the takeaways? Well, I have 3 big takeaways. The first one is how little cooking has to actually do with cooking. Yes, the time that you spend in the kitchen is absolutely a significant amount of time, just like the time that I spend writing is a significant amount of time. But when I tell you that I only spend 6 to 8 hours writing every week, I'm being totally serious and I'm totally lying. And the reason that's the case is because we think about writing the wrong way. We think about writing as something that you do at your computer. And I don't spend a lot of time doing that. You know what I do? I spend a lot of time consuming great ideas, having interesting experiences, trying to have the best conversations I can, sourcing the world for ingredients. And then when I find good things, I save them in a note-taking system so that when I write, boom, it's really easy because I've already done the work. So actually, in a funny way, my whole life is about writing, but it's not about typing. And typing and writing are very different things. That's the first takeaway. Writing has very little to do with typing. The second takeaway is we cook way better when we cook for other people. And this is why I write in public. Guys, I was the worst writer growing up. Just terrible. I got bad grades in my classes. I was like, why would anyone ever wanted to do this? I thought it was boring. And then I started cooking for other people and all these cool things happened. I found a great business partner named Tiago, who's like one of my best friends in the world. It's how I find people to work with. I have my own summer camp for 10 to 12-year-olds. And the teacher that I work with, her name is Anna, and she found me through my writing. So cool. Almost all my best friends are people that I've met by writing online. And then I get to hang out with you today just because I write online and I'm known for writing and you reached out to me. My whole life comes from cooking for other people, writing for other people. And then third is cooking is more fun when we do it for other people, but we also do it for ourselves sometimes. You know what? Very often it helps to journal, to think through ideas. Like one of the things that I do whenever I make a mistake, and I make a lot of mistakes. I made one yesterday. And what I do is I will write down what is the mistake, and then I'll say, what was I thinking? And then I'll say, how can I prevent this from happening again? And I have a whole log of my mistakes. And what I do is through that journaling process, which I don't share with other people, I can just make sure that I don't make the same mistakes over and over again. And then I begin to see patterns where, for example, more than 50% of my mistakes come from not putting something into my calendar and missing a meeting. So I have just been extra diligent about making sure that I put things into my calendar right when I make a plan. And writing for myself and doing some journaling has helped me think better and helps me think through things that are confusing. And it's the same thing. Like you spend a lot of time cooking for yourself. That is a lot of probably most of what you're going to do. You're going to be making yourself breakfast. You're going to be making yourself lunch, dinner, maybe a really good smoothie. But the real long-term rewards of writing should also come from writing for other people, because that's when it's fun, that's when you meet people, and that's when you actually begin to think better. So that's how I think about writing, and thank you for listening.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions for David?
Any questions? I hope I hope that was okay.
No, that was excellent.
That was great.
That was outstanding.
Thanks, guys. I want to know what questions you have.
How often do you...
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, go for it, Rowan.
How do you share your books to other people?
What do you mean?
Like when you make a book, how do you get the book out to the world?
He posts it online or puts it in a bookstore, I bet you.
Yeah, so I've never published a book. I just write articles, and I write so many articles that it's the equivalent of books. And so what I just do is I post it on my website, and then I send it to people on my email list. And then
What's your website?
it's called Perell.com, Perell.com. And I'm very thankful to my dad who bought that domain name in 1997. Way before all of you were born, when I was 3 years old.
How often do you think that we should be reading, or kids should be reading every day?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I barely read when I was a kid. I like really mean it. I was a horrible writer.
I love reading.
I didn't like books. So
I love reading.
This probably isn't what you want me to say. I don't think that I read my first book till I was 20, and I'm not kidding. Like, I think I had a moment in college where, like, and I mean like a real book. I think I had a moment in college, like my junior year, and I think I said that was actually the first book I ever finished. Like, what I just did as a kid was I just didn't read the book. I was just so active, and I just wanted to be outside. And what I needed was to realize that ideas were something that would be interesting. And that didn't come to me until more than 2 decades into my life. And then I just flipped a switch, and I was just like, oh my goodness, you can cook for other people, and then amazing people come into your world, just like you can write for other people. And I've just had such just my life has improved so dramatically since I've started being interested in ideas. And it just took me a while to do it. So it's hard to say, to really answer your question, because I can't really in good faith say that kids need to be reading, because I didn't do it, and I'm happy with where I ended up. With that said, I think reading is just a really special activity, because books are where we store the treasures of human thought. And I wish I had learned earlier in life that I could benefit from somebody else's really hard work, and through a book have their ideas put into my brain, and realize that that's so cool. More questions, please. Any questions? Mac, Lex, Rowan,
No.
Megan?
No questions, but I thought this was fantastic.
Good, I'm happy to hear. I was a little worried.
No, it's really good.
that,
It's
that it
great.
wasn't going to be.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. We've been working on our quite a bit lately, so tons of notes. I can't wait to implement these ideas into our learning in the future. And yeah, thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, happy to do it. Yeah, one of the, I'll tell you, just as teachers and parents, one of the cheat codes is whenever you talk about information, just think of it as food. and information and food are like this perfect synthesis. Like we actually talk about information like we talk about food, like we digest ideas. You can have a thirst for knowledge. And so we do this at a very subliminal level. And whenever you combine like whenever you want to talk about information, just talk about food. And the metaphors just like always fit together. And it's like ideas are so abstract, and so then the concrete nature of food then makes it really easy to understand ideas. So it's just a cheat code that I've learned as a writing teacher, and I highly recommend it.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, and enjoy your day.
Thank you so much. Bye.